Hello, I am Alan Geister, and this is my Programming with C matrix operation project. So you'll notice I have two projects. I have this one and this one. So V2 is my final project, the one I'm happy with, and this is kind of like my V1, my prototype. So the reason I did this was because, well, I'll get into that later. So the differences between V1 and V2 are that v2 only has one function, and that's the required function, the getDeterminant function of our project parameters. And then you have main, and then this long bit of code. And then we have this function, my final project function. My final project code, which is divided up into four functions: my input correction function, my determinative function, the matrix operation function, where it just does the matrix operation based off the input. Excuse me. And then my get matrices function. So, and then I have main all the way down here. That basically just calls this function. And then these functions, the operation determinant input correction function get called here, and then it gets called here. So this is basically how my pseudocode is fully structured, which is why I did it like this. And then, so the reason why I have a V1 is because testing each individual component for option A or option B or option C, it gets really convoluted in this code, and I got really annoyed with having to constantly comment out things. So I ended up just pasting like um, each parts for each operation into an if statement, if else chain in this function where it's in this project in V1, where it's basically separated into sections. So this is if input is A, this is if input is B, implication if input is C, transposition, then oh yeah, this is C, and then, yeah, this is the system of equations. So it just made testing a lot easier to deal with when it came to, because the reason I did it this way is because A, it's a little bit more efficient, 300 lines versus 380 lines, around 380 lines, which is what I was thinking with my pseudocode. And also it runs a little bit more efficiently. And then also, um, yeah, it just made testing a lot easier. So a lot of the issues that came with doing it this way were from the fact that my arguments were similar in name to the arguments in this function, or similar to variable names. But yeah, that's why these matrix names are different, and then versus the ones here, because I think at some point they were the same, and I was losing it. And then also operation, these are the same argument names for matrix operation and the get matrices function, which I could have changed, but it wouldn't have made much of a difference because they're used in almost the exact same way in both functions. I could have, in theory, made it a global variable, but I think I didn't because it made like calling it in main also kind of annoying. I don't know. I kept running into scope issues when I did it as a global, which is why I did it as an argument. And then it's just, yeah, dealing with the scope was really annoying, where the variable or the argument was defined, and it's just a bit annoying. But how I fixed it was just a lot of trial and error and trying to figure out why mistakes happen. And then also, when I was focusing on, since I focused basically on each individual case, where it was addition or subtraction in V1, it just made it a lot easier to debug until eventually I was able to get it down into the form we have now, the working form we have now, anyways. And then besides that, um, there were no other issues. So yeah, I was basically just bouncing between V1 and my pseudocode whenever I would get stuck, just using my pseudocode as a reference to where I was currently in my progress when I was making the code, and then using V1 as a way to test the code. So that was my solution. I mean, I could have commented it out, but it would have commented out each part, but it just made, since I was divvying up each section based off the prompt and how the prompt would change based off the user input, it just made it really tedious to constantly keep commenting out things. So it made having to work with V1 so much easier to deal with. But anyway, so those were the main challenges I dealt with, just scope and debugging. And so to fill out the rest of the time, I will give a demonstration. So I'll do the addition subtraction first. Is the row number? Let's do 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh no, 1, 2, 2, 3. Okay, I'll do it 2, 3, 2, 3. What is the call? 3, 2.5, 1, 2.5, 6, 8, 20, 52, 12, 32, 12, 18. Oh, we'll do an add, sure. So you'll see add, subtract. Oh yeah, that's because negative. Yep, yeah, yep, yep. All working. What if I wanted to do subtraction? We'll do a 2 by 2. 1, 5, 2. We'll do 1.02. Why not? 0.1. Yeah. We'll do a subtraction. As you can see, the subtraction is working. We'll do multiplication. 2, 1, 4, 2. Oh no. We'll do 3 by 2 by 2 by 3. It'll be a 3 by 3 matrix. 0.2, negative 1, 0.5, 6.2, 0.5, 8, 10.4, 2.2, nah, sure, 6, 20, and there we go. We get a 3 by 3 matrix. We'll do the finding of. We'll do the case where it doesn't work. Yep, system equation is unsolvable. And then we'll do this part. Um, uh, then it'll give, yep. Those are approximate answers because the answers would have to be in a decimal form. But anyways, that covers my entire project, my my journey, and as you can see, it is working. At least in this compiler. This is an older compiler, so on newer compilers, the only issue from what I've seen between older and newer compilers is sometimes the syntax for putting like multiple matrices into as arguments, or like no, as multi-dimensional matrices as arguments. In here, it can get messy sometimes. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye bye.